I've talked with Cato some, but you know what? Cato Cooper may be the next person we need to talk to. But no, we're back with Mr. Paul McCoy. We're going to go back a little bit. We've talked about Jordan Lake. We've talked about the Civil War. We've talked about the 40s, the 50s. But I want to get back to what was it like for the McCoy kids growing up? You, your brother, and your sister.
As far back as I can remember, I was 4 years old. I can remember living on the Toady Goodwin Road in a house we rented from the Bell family, which was well known in Chatham County, the Bells. And we lived there when I was 4 years old, and that's as far back as I could remember. I can't remember 2 years old like some people can. But I do remember vividly seeing my uncle come up with two big horses and a V-plow through the snow that had fell, and made us pads around the house to walk in because the snow was so deep. And I can remember one of my first cousins sliding down his daddy's trailer and putting a splinter up, as you know what, about 2 inches long. I remember that, and they hustled him off down to Apex to get the splinter out. So that was not a good slide. And I remember seeing two mules out on the Toady Goodwin dirt road being broke in by a man called Laufey. And he had those two mules. They were running just as hard as they could run in front of a wagon. And it looked like the Western movies to me. I have never seen nothing like it in my life. But he was breaking them in, getting them under control. So it didn't tear the wagon up, and it got done. And then I can remember my brothers and all of them climbing up trees, and somebody would take an axe. They wouldn't get that hard to the ground, and somebody would take an axe and cut the tree and let them fall to the ground. So I don't think I participated in that one too much. And I remember my sister having the scarlet fever when we lived there at that Bell house, and she had to be quarantined for 6 weeks upstairs. So that was a long time for her, but she came through scarlet fever without having any damage to her brain. And I had a cousin who had scarlet fever at the same time, and it actually damaged her brain. So that was a real scary thing to have back in those days. And I guess we have vaccine for it now, because I never hear tell of it anymore, so hopefully we never will. But I can remember too getting out of my uncle's car. You know, people wouldn't carry you right to the doorstep when they carried you somewhere. You'd get out up at the road from the car and you would walk to the house. But I think I can remember that I almost shut the car door on my hand. I know I was ringing that thing as we went back down the house. And then I saw a young man have a seizure while I was there. That was the first time that I'd ever seen anybody have a seizure, and that scared me so bad. He was on the ground, frothing in the mouth, and I think my mom probably knew more than I didn't know anything. I'm 4 years old, but I believe they put something in his mouth so he wouldn't chew his tongue. But I guess he'd been having seizures before, and they probably were aware of it, but it surely scared me real good. And I tell you what we did too. We had what was considered the best hound dog in the area, old Rattler. And old Rattler was good. He'd go to the high woods, he would hunt for possum. He'd go down on the branch and hunt for coons. And he caught a fox. He run a fox to death and caught him, which was unusual for a dog to be able to do that. So anyway, but old Rattler would go over to my neighbor's house, Miss Irene Poe, and boy, she was super. She would make cookies and put them in a brown bag and hang them under the dog's neck while he was over there, and the dog would bring the cookies back to me at our house. That was about a mile away. So he smelled cookies, but he didn't eat no cookies. I might have given him a little bit of cookies after he got home. I probably ate most of them myself and said, "I'm sorry about that, Rattler, but they're so good I can't give you much of this cookie. Anyway, that happened a lot of times. I can remember that because he'd go there about every day, about a mile away down the dirt road. Then we moved up to what is known to us as the Nami Wilson place. That was just this side of Wilsonville on the left-hand side, and right now that's where the gate is that goes into the headquarters of the parks. We lived there 2 years. We grew tobacco and we mixed chicken feed out in the yard for the chicken. I can remember my dad buying the ingredients at Pittsboro and bringing it home, and we'd stir it up out there and sack it back up in the yard to feed to the chicken. And we always had chicken, and we always had eggs. But we come a long ways there about the chicken deal. Anyway, first year I went to school there, I can remember that when I come home, I had brought a beer can home with me. I mean, what a beer can was. And my brother was out there, and I threw it and hit him upside the head with an empty beer. I don't know why I did that. Was really, he should have beat me up.
Now, was it a can or a bottle?
It was a can.
Can, all right.
Yeah, so he had a hard head like the rest of us, hopefully, but that was about. I was so spoiled growing up. All of them spoiled me to death, I know. They should have beat me up, but it didn't. My mama never. I say this sometimes, people say, I know that ain't so. I said, my mama never gave me a whipping as long as I lived, and my daddy didn't either. I probably should have had some, but I didn't ever get no whippings. The only whippings I got were from my sister. When me and my sister would have little fights every now and then, you know how that goes, and then we'd be good. My brother, he was very passive. He didn't get involved in no fighting. He just kind of laughed at all of it. So anyway, we lived at that Wilson place for 2 years. Then we moved down to the Hunt place. Like I've already said, we stayed there a year. The farm was so poor it wasn't worth having, and we left there and went down on the river right below Jordan Dam and stayed there from 1937 to 1943. We moved up here to what was known as the Will Goodwin place. My daddy rounded up enough money to buy it. He gave Mr. Goodwin $100 deposit sometime in that summer, and to buy the place. And he searched pretty hard to find the $5,900 that was needed to sew the deal up on January 1. So my brother, he said to my brother in the Army, said, "Do you have any money?" He said, "Yeah, I got $500. He said, "I need it pretty bad." So he gave my dad the $500. Of course, Dad had a little money, and then he sold the timber. Must have got paid in advance, because somewhere or another he rounded up enough money so that on December the 29th, I think, Daddy was sick and not even able to come up here with the money. So my mom came with Mr. Estes Holland, who was farming down the river with us in what was known as the Jack Goodwin place. And so Mom come up here with $6,000 and, well, $5,900, and finished paying for the Will Goodwin place. And frankly, the whole family was just about tore up, because I reckon they thought we wouldn't ever find enough money to buy. Can't prove that, but they sure did hate to move. And but we were real happy to be up here in a better house. And I think my daddy works real hard all of his life to see if he could find a good home for my mama to live in. And he accomplished that. This place had a store on it. Mr. Goodwin had a big storehouse. He had a cotton gin, he had a corn mill, and he had a blacksmith shop. And it was a pretty good farm here, 130 acres of it. So we had the farm down the river, then we had this farm, and my dad had bought a little later on a little 65-acre tract over toward Mary Oaks, and he gave that to my sister. that's how my sister's husband was able to borrow some money to start a brace shop. So Dr. Rainey called him over to, well, I got ahead of myself a little bit. Dr. Rainey called my brother-in-law over to Chapel Hill to start a brace shop because he was working in the brace shop at Duke. So he established that brace shop, and then he decided, and I'm going to see if I can start an independent brace shop. And by him having that property over here, he was able to get a loan on my sister's property to start a brace shop in Raleigh. It was called Capital Orthotics. And he was able to establish several brace shops before he died. And I can remember going with him and Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker was one of the most well-known orthopedic surgeons in the world at the time. And we would go to these clinics all down in North Carolina where there's so many crippled people at. And I can remember Dr. Baker being so down to earth with people. He made you feel real like he was just like you were as a person. Didn't make you feel uncomfortable. Some people make you feel uncomfortable, so I guess they do if you think you're up to their category, but that's another. Anyway, I would go with them to those clinics, and Dr. Baker, the one thing I can remember him saying, this is typical of having your children too late in life. He said, you should try to have your families while you're young. So that was the one thing he told me, and I believe there's some truth in that, even to this day, but I can't prove it. Anyway, Dr. Baker, still a Baker facility over there in Durham that's committed to helping young kids and so forth. And of course, he's deceased as well as my brother-in-law. Well, my brother-in-law left a lot of he left a lot of things for the kids that gave them the ability to further what he did, plus they were able to educate their children, who all of them got good education. So that was a good plus side of actually my sister having the 65 acres of land, because you couldn't borrow money on your house. He wanted to establish a practice of his own. You gotta have something besides your home. So that's where that comes from. Then, so I've been here ever since 1943, right here where I am now. I got married in 1950. I had a boy in 1952. I had another one in 1956, and I had a daughter in 1962. And I stayed here. We stayed here with my mama for a while, and then I built a house up on the hill right here inside of this house for me and my wife and the kid. And I still own that house. My first wife deceased, and my oldest boy is deceased now. We got one boy and one girl. One's living in near Golston, and one's up in Boone. And but when my first wife passed away, the kids, we had divorced. My kids owned the house, so they sold the place. It was 5 acres in the house we built, and they sold it, and it was bought by somebody else, and they kept it for about probably 20 years, and I was able to buy it back. So I still own the house I built in 1961. I still own that in the home place here, and I've sold a lot of property to different people that I grew up with around here, and we've got a pretty solid little community of people that I respect, and I think they respect us. So we're fortunate to have good people that we know.
So when you got out of school, you mentioned you went to the high school down in
I went high school in Montefiore.
Okay. And
yeah, I dropped out 1 year when my dad was so sick. I dropped out a year to take care of everything on the farm. We had by then we'd bought a pickup truck, and we'd been able to buy a Studebaker car that was right after World War II ended. The Studebakers at Moncure, they had a Moncure Motor Company, so we finally got a car before my dad died, and I had an old pickup truck. But anyway, I dropped out of school for a year, and my brother and sister insisted that I go back the next year, and I did. I went back to school and got a diploma, and drove the school bus some that year, and was still able to kind of keep things going here on the farm. We had people farming with us that were responsible people, and I was still raising some chickens back then in the houses that Mr. Goodwin had built. And eventually I started building chicken houses bigger. I built the first chicken house in 1950, a 24 by 200. And then I built another chicken house in 1953, and I just put chickens in it when Hurricane Hazel hit. So it withstood a great test of time that day, because that was one of the worst hurricanes and the worst storms we've ever had. And I stayed outdoors from 12 o'clock to probably about midnight trying to make sure all the windows and doors were nailed. I just drove 20 penny nails all day in windows trying to make sure they didn't blow out. It was a real stressful day. And it hit so quick, we didn't think it was coming here. And I was down in that morning putting a standpipe in a pond that I'd built, and I should have been up here looking out for what was going to happen, but we didn't know it. Back then, those days, you didn't know things like we do today. So my uncle had said, I'm going to go down to the beach and see a hurricane today. And about 2 or 3 hours later, he didn't have to go nowhere to see the hurricane. The hurricane would not like to knock his house down. So, you know, that's how the way it was. And I've always had a lot of respect for hurricanes. Anyway, getting back, then I built another chicken house in 1958. So I had 3 chicken houses, and I was selling chickens here. I was financing all the, buying the chicks, buying the food, and I was making 25 or 30 cents a head. I paid for that chicken house in the first year. And things were going good, and all of a sudden the farmers across Chatham County started growing chickens on contracts, and they were growing chickens for 5 and 6 cents a head while I was making 30, and all of a sudden my days of being independent were over. I had to go contract too with a Wake Farmers Cooperative in Raleigh, where it sits right where all the big complex is of state government in Raleigh. I went down there in 1954, and all those years, 3 or 4 years, I hauled chicken feed out of North Salisbury Street for several years, where right down old number 1, I hauled all my chicken feed myself in bags, and then all of a sudden we progressed to bulk feed, so that was the end of hauling chicken feed out of Raleigh. But Raleigh was a little bitty town back then, but and you know what it is now. It's so big I can't even imagine thinking it was going to be. I know that I was on the board of directors at the Wake Farmers Co-op, and we were small, and they bought our place out, and I think they paid us $3 a square foot for the property we owned, which was quite a bit of money. We reinvested the money with a group down here at St. Paul's. We owned a fourth of it, and then all of a sudden times got tough, and Wake Farmers went out of business, and then I started growing more tobacco and depending less on chickens. So tobacco's been really good for me. I've probably the chickens and tobacco together really made life bearable for me, and I enjoyed all of it. And so agriculture is a part of my life. I've tried to keep up with it in Chatham County, and I try to look at Chatham Park as being a great opportunity for the future of farmers in the western part of Chatham County. I think it'll give them an alternative if they need to work off the farm some to grow poultry and cattle, and some of them are going to need to make some extra money. They can help build what we're going to see in Chatham over the coming years, that I believe will be a great thing for Chatham County. At my age, I won't see much of it, but I feel like it's a wonderful opportunity for a lot of things. And so I might be out of step with some people, but it will, in my opinion, turn out one of the best things the county's ever had.
Now, when you were farming, were you doing anything else besides just farming, or were you just concentrating on farming?
I farmed completely. I never worked off at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked on the farm, and I began to, I started, but my brother helped me buy my first tractor, and from there we progressed to other tractors, and we went away completely from horse and mule farming. I bought the last horse I bought was bought from Mr. Blair in Pittsboro. He had a horse stable right there where Hardy's at in town, and he had a guy work for him named Luther, and he believed in horses so much that he didn't accept the fact of automotive mechanism. But anyway, the Blairs have always been a integral part of Pittsboro. John Blair put the clocks on the new courthouse and all those things. But the Blair Hotel was owned by, and Mr. Blair was sheriff of Chatham County years ago. I don't even know what year it was. It must have been about probably 1920. I'm not sure, but he was a fine man. I liked him.
So the Blair Hotel was an actual hotel at one time.
It was. A lot of the people that worked at the woven label mill didn't have cars, so they